Well, it took forever to get there, but once it finally arrived, it was well worth the wait, both the multi-year wait to reach the apex of this criminal lie finally undone, but also just the days wait to get through the hours of an excruciatingly boring hearing to finally see what we've all been waiting for. Here's Jussie Smollett, now formally sentenced to jail time, plus a bonus encore of Jussie insisting if he gets Epsteined, well, Jussie did not Epstein himself.
You will spend the first 150 days of your sentence in the Cook County Jail, and that will start today, right here, right now. Do you have any questions?
No, I would just like to say to Your Honor that I am not suicidal. That's what I would like to say.
Okay.
I'm not suicidal.
Except he kinda is, or at least he's pathologically self-defeating. This guy just can't stop kicking himself in the nuts, trying to own everybody else to the point that he's now going to jail for it. The official sentence is 150 days in Cook County Jail, plus nearly $150,000 in fines and restitution, plus 30 months probation for Jussie. And some people are calling that a light sentence for his hoax hate crime that, of course, inflamed racial tensions at taxpayer expense. Not so, though, because Jussie has been sentenced to death, effectively, by prison corona. This according to his defense lawyer, begging for mercy.
The jails are inundated with the pandemic. Illinois had one of the worst cases in the world. Sending Mr. Smollett to jail is almost like a death sentence. Yes, it is.
Even though part of his defense team's case that Jussie deserves that mercy is his voluntary exposure to far worse.
Jussie has always been active in the pressing issues facing our communities, such as HIV/AIDS.
Men and women living with HIV and AIDS.
African-led organizations doing AIDS work.
Though I guess, in fairness, exposure to one creates vulnerability to the other. But even if Jussie does die a hero's corona death in jail, it will be largely because that is the fate that he chose. The greatest irony of sentencing day isn't just what Jussie considers to be acceptable or unacceptable viral risk. The greatest irony is what Jussie said after denying suicidality. He still maintains his innocence. After all, Jussie said, he could have admitted his guilt a long time ago.
I am not suicidal, and I am innocent. I could have said that I was guilty a long time ago.
Yeah, he could have. And he should have, because if he did, he almost certainly wouldn't be hauled away to jail like this. If he had just taken responsibility when this ridiculous plot fell apart, the worst he'd be facing is fines or probation, and maybe not even that. The judge said the jail sentence was specifically due to aggravating factors. One of those aggravating factors being Jussie's decision to take the stand and lie instead of just coming clean.
This could only be described as pure perjury. You got on the witness stand. You didn't have to, you did, you certainly have a right to, but you committed hour upon hour upon hour of pure perjury.
And while Jussie has several lawyers doing their damnedest to try to get him leniency, they can only do as their client directs. And there is no doubt that the decision to take the stand and lie was Jussie's, not legal advice given to him. There is no doubt that the decision to fight these charges for every inch at every step was Jussie's, not legal advice given to him. And so this final scene of an indignant Jussie being hauled away to jail was, just like the shoelace noose and the declaration of MAGA country and everything else in this ridiculous story, Jussie's own creation, not the result of external advice given to him. Which is why, even after all the evidence in the case fell apart, even after Jussie was tried and convicted, even after Jussie faced and now received jail time as a consequence, the strategy remained double, triple, quadruple, forever down. It was the only strategy that the man pulling all the levers, Jussie himself, would accept, despite loss after loss after loss. And so for Thursday's sentencing hearing, Jussie got the whole gang back together to push the insanity at his direction one last time, again, to his own detriment. And so before I move on from the multi-year saga that this story was, I want one last memory of just how deep that delusion dug in. It took over 5.5 hours for Jussie to be sentenced on Thursday, a process during which almost everything else in the world was blamed except for Jussie himself. Racism, the court, the media, public opinion. These are all the things that should be blamed, but not the one thing that the judge could see as obvious. Jussie's own hubris.
You have another side of you that is profoundly arrogant and selfish and narcissistic. That's the only thing that can be concluded.
And the commitment to the Jussie is always right and the world is always wrong delusion created face-melting hypocrisies throughout the day. Jussie's brother gave a statement in which he said, "We can't send Jussie to jail because that would be a waste of taxpayer resources."
Mass incarceration is also an unnecessary burden to the taxpayers, to law enforcement, and it is simply unjust and wrong.
It's simply unjust and wrong, except, of course, when Jussie does it. In that case, it's just a low-level crime, unworthy of any serious punishment.
The crime he has been accused of is not even considered a felony in most states. Disorderly conduct is oftentimes not even prosecuted, and charges are frequently dropped.
Besides, we have public trust to restore, says Jussie's brother. How are we going to restore public trust by sending Jussie to jail?
Restoring public trust. In my opinion, you don't restore public trust by giving him a stiff sentence, which includes jail time. That's not restoring public trust.
Well, perhaps we can all agree on restoring public trust when you end your commitment to the public lie. But of course, the public lie is the central point of the entire statement.
You know, I strongly believe in my brother's innocence. In my humble opinion, Jussie is completely innocent. It's nothing more than a he said, she said kind of case, right? With no evidence to have warranted his conviction in the first place.
But even if Jussie is guilty, to send him to jail would still be wrong because of the universal super scapegoat here to save the day. What else? Racism. That's right. If we send Jussie to jail, that will contribute to racially disproportionate incarceration rates, and we can't have racially disproportionate incarceration rates, even if incarceration is perfectly appropriate for each individual offender. This was the argument from Jussie's brother and his defense lawyer.
There has been bipartisan agreement that there's disparate treatment of black men and minorities in the criminal justice system. They get punished harder and harsher for low-level offenses compared to white counterparts. That's a fact.
Unnecessary mass incarceration, which predominantly affects African Americans.
Mr. Webb got up here and talked about Mr. Smollett's conduct, and that's offensive. He's a black man. He knows. You can't educate him on racism issues.
My mom's 69 years old. She was born in 1952 in Texas. Right? She knows a thing about racism. She doesn't really need a lecture about the extent of racism. Neither does an openly gay African American man.
If Jussie understood racism, he could have written a plot more convincing than Trump henchmen roaming their MAGA turf of sub-zero Chicago trying to noose lasso an unsuspecting black subway grazer, something that has never happened and will never happen. But okay, so Jussie's jail sentence is racism. That's point of blame number one. Point of blame number two is the court and the justice system itself. Jussie's lawyer says that Jussie going to jail is an Eighth Amendment violation, as in it's cruel and unusual punishment.
Because there is an Eighth Amendment issue here, cruel and unusual punishment. Punishment that is too severe for the offense.
Now, I'm no expert on that Supreme Court case law, but I'm very skeptical that jail time for a jailable offense is an Eighth Amendment violation, because if so, all prisons are Eighth Amendment violations. But Jussie was also denied his presumption of innocence. This according to his older brother and his even more hysterical younger brother raging outside after the sentencing.
He has never received the benefit of the doubt or a proper presumption of innocence.
They want to say in that court and said that he's the reason why folks aren't going to report hate crimes. They're the reason why folks aren't going to report hate crimes.
Because none of you believed it.
None of y'all believed it. He does not deserve this. He was attacked. Do people never once think, even the folks who are naysayers, do you ever once think, what happens if he's telling the truth?
If he's telling the truth?
Do y'all ever think about how poorly you feel in that situation? He's in jail for 5 months. That is unacceptable.
Yeah, well, the reason he's in jail now and not 3 years ago is precisely because he enjoyed a multi-year presumption of innocence and a trial that presumed his innocence until his guilt was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So do we ever consider his innocence? Yes, the jury did for weeks. It's just the evidence otherwise was conclusively convincing. So it's racism's fault, it's the justice system's fault, and by extension, it must be the media's fault too. If the public isn't adequately considering Jussie's innocence, well, there must be information lacking or bad information circulating. Jussie's grandma and brother just said it explicitly in the courtroom. The media has done a poor job covering this story to Jussie's detriment.
The overwhelming majority of mass and online media reporting in early 2019 resulted in a premature assumption of guilt.
The Jussie I know and love does not match up with the media's betrayal of him. And I'm talking to you guys. You haven't done a good job on investigative reporting, and so you got to do better. I challenge you to do more investigative reporting.
Oh yeah, that was the problem. Media treatment that was biased against Jussie. We all know he never got the chance for his crocodile tears to flow unchallenged on national TV.
I was talking to a friend, and I said, I just want them to find them. And she said, sweetie, they're not gonna find them. So I'm just gonna be left here with this so they get to go free and go about their life and possibly attack someone else. That's not cool to me.
Not that there was any shortage of red flags there, but in retrospect, it was a major one that Jussie was so certain that his attackers would never be discovered. It implied he knew a thing or two about who they were and how they would get away with it, or at least how they planned to. And that's the thing. What does Grandma think more media scrutiny would uncover exactly? Is she aware of key facts yet to be revealed? If so, the trial would have been an excellent opportunity to present them. And if she just forgot, well, right before sentencing would have been another great opportunity too. It's awfully awkward to demand more critical questions asked when every additional question asked has only uncovered additional Jussie guilt. It was only when no questions were asked that Jussie enjoyed at least some perception of innocence. And of course, from racism to the courts to the media, what cavalcade of scapegoats would be complete without the current topical, fashionable pick? That's right. Not only is Vladimir Putin responsible for your spiking gas prices, not only is he responsible for your rising grocery costs, he is also a factor for consideration in the cruelty of Jussie's jail sentence. Now, to be perfectly accurate, they don't blame Vladimir Putin, but here's Jussie's grandma saying that treating Jussie this way will bring us closer to Putin's wrath, and Jussie's brother saying it's cruel to send Jussie to jail at a time of such conflict in Eastern Europe.
Get the white collar guys, okay, who are really making money, who are really corrupt. We've got to do something about saving our democracy here so that we don't get another Putin.
Please remember that we are currently living in a time in which we are enduring a vicious pandemic, extreme economic uncertainty, a major conflict in Eastern Europe, and global paradigm shifts taking place everywhere.
Yeah, I'm sure of the many concerns that were swirling through Jussie's mind during his first night in jail, that one was at the forefront. He's worried about the strong man on the other side of the world and not the stronger man at his six. And it's easy just to leave it at that, just some fodder for some cheap shots, because even as the judge himself says, Jussie is a literal joke.
Your very name has become an adverb for lying. Oh, pulling a Jussie, something like that. That's awful. You're the butt of jokes.
And now even his butt is the butt of jokes too. An impressive achievement, but there are some sincere lessons of value to learn here too. Yes, few of us are likely ever to organize such an outlandish self-serving plot, but all of us will end up in bad situations where we are at some level of fault, if only by our own mistakes or even through our responses to the wrongdoing of others. And when that happens, we have two choices. One, we can assume that bad things that happen to us are our fault and respond accordingly, or two, we can dig in and blame the world around us. And option one is always philosophically correct, even when it isn't factually correct. When you assume that the bad things that happen to you are your fault, you will do everything in your power to improve yourself and to change them, meaning you are constantly building the best possible version of yourself and exerting the maximum possible influence on the world around you. When you point fingers instead, you rot because you reject the premise that you need any improvement at all, and so you get none. And yeah, given his own ridiculous behavior, there was no way for Jussie to come out of this episode looking good. But there were ways for him to come out of it looking better than a raging lunatic whose best excuse is now a mental health lapse. If he had just admitted to the hoax 3 years ago, this story would be dead by now. It would be a passing punchline of only occasional reference. Instead, years of his life have been wasted, and many months more will be further wasted behind bars for no reason other than this guy can't acknowledge his own responsibility for anything. Responsibility will set you free. Scapegoating will imprison you. That is Jussie's sincere lesson for all of us. Also, don't pay for your crimes with traceable checks. Also, don't hire Nigerian scammers to do your dirty work. Also, just in general, don't eat at Subway at 2 in the morning. Some lessons are more poetic than others. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it.